Well, we are so excited to be joined by Calvin Leon Smith. Calvin has a BA in theater from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, an MFA in acting from the Juilliard School. He has played Larry in Fat Ham on Broadway and is currently playing Cliff in Cabaret as of 8 days ago. He took over that role. He's been on TV and film and stuff like The Deuce, High Maintenance, and The Underground Railroad. Calvin, welcome on the pod. How are you feeling today?
I feel pretty good. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me, number one. I'm really glad that we were able to make it happen. But in
You made me sound like
general,
there's a number two. You said number one, so is there a number two?
well, number two, in general, I feel really good.
Good.
Finishing up that first week of the show.
Yep.
And now that we don't have rehearsal anymore, as of last Friday, I
Mm.
can start to live my life a little bit more.
Yes. Yes. Trickle in
And
some actual life.
yes, get back
Yeah.
to the gym, take care of myself a little bit better, all that kind of
Calvin,
good
this is
stuff.
someone who, for people who aren't watching the YouTube, Calvin has never left the gym. He's lying to you if ever pretends like he hasn't been going to the gym. Okay. It's very clear this is a man who's been going to the gym plenty. One thing I forgot to leave out of your bio, or I forgot to include in your bio, of course, is that Calvin is a fantastic MTCA monologue coach. So we'll chat a little bit about that too, and
Yes.
some of your teaching work with us. But before we get into that, and before I get to, I want to kind of talk through your college and grad school journey. But can you just give me like a 30-second catch up to like get you to 16, 17 years old? So let's get you to college. Like in terms of where you grew up, what your interest in theater, how you discovered it all. Like just give me like the quick cliff notes there. Ooh, cliff
Yeah.
notes.
So I was born in Texas, did 3 years in Ohio, from or 4 years, first through fifth grade, and then landed in Memphis from fifth grade to college.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't come across theater until I was in high school. But I was always intrigued, for field trips, we would go see. I think I saw maybe three plays throughout elementary and middle school.
Mm-hmm.
I was always drawn to it, but I didn't think that it was a thing that you could actually do. And then I spent most of my youth as a competitive gymnast, and I made the switch once I got to high school. I stopped doing gymnastics, and then I just stuck with. I found there was an audition for, and then there were none by Agatha Christie in the
Mm-hmm.
hall in my high school, and I was like, "Oh, that might be cool." Now that I'm not, playing a sport anymore, so I went on a whim to audition, and I got a part,
Mm.
and I still didn't even really take it seriously in high school in terms of career.
Yep.
I imagined that I was going to go to college and do advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And I touched on advertising a little bit, but then I made the switch once I
And
got
why
to.
advertising? Did that come from parents or just something you thought you were also interested in?
Well, I just wanted to make money.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would be a good.
Of course.
I had taken this graphic design class in high school, and the woman who ran it, Miss Shamblin, she had worked in the advertising field,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really drawn to the idea of being a creative in that. I also took an AP art. I was very artsy minded,
Mm-hmm.
um, in high school. And so when I got to college, it was kind of a no brainer that that was what I was going to do. Theater had really taken a backseat. I didn't even see a play until I was in college, until my sophomore year.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then what about, so as you look at the Tennessee experience, what sort of led you to, obviously this was not an audition experience,
No.
getting into school. You were thinking having to go in advertising. I'm not sure. What was the college experience that then led us into theater? What was that, those 4 years in terms of eventually you're going to be now graduating and applying to Juilliard? How did that sort of transition happen for you?
Yeah, I hated my major. Um and I always tell this when people ask, I kind of tell this part of the story, although as someone who's no longer religious, it doesn't really it's an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a part of this Christian group um at my university called the Black Student Christian Union or something like that. And we were off campus at this church, and this woman was preaching, and she was like, everything you do, she was like, if if you want to do a certain major, and it's killing you that you're not doing it because you're doing something else. You're supposed to be doing the thing that you really want to do,
Mhm.
period. And I went home and I thought about what she said, and I called my mom and I was like, I think I want to be a theater major. And she was like, oh my God, thank God.
Huh.
She was like, that's what you're supposed to be doing. And
Huh.
I was like, I think so. It's what I want to do. So I took that energy and that feeling and I went to the arts and sciences building and I asked to change to a theater major. And they were like, why?
Yeah.
And I said, I told them that I had done it in high school. I had really enjoyed it. And I had this strong feeling that it was what I was supposed to do. By this time, it was my second semester of my sophomore year.
Mhm.
I ended up losing like 19 credits. Like I don't have a minor because
Uh-huh.
I spent so much time in the communications
Yep.
department. Uh, and then right before that school year ended, I auditioned for. So I will say this too. So my school, I went to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. It is connected to a Lord D professional theater,
Mhm.
the Clarence Brown Theater. Um, so although I didn't get the rigor of a BFA program, I think I learned a lot by just observation
Yep.
and being in that program at the University of Tennessee. I only took two acting
Mhm.
classes. I took two acting classes. I took a movement class, no speech class, no voice class,
Mhm.
no singing, no dancing, um, a theater history and like a play analysis
Yep.
class. Like those are some of like the core classes that I took. But overall, I'd say a lot of my education came from observing the professionals that
Yep.
came in and, being like, oh, I don't want to act like that, or I do want to act like that.
Yep.
Um,
I mean, that's the model
so
of acting for thousands of years. It's kind of funny about the BFA,
yeah,
MFA world, which we'll talk about the MFA of Juilliard, but, for so long, that's how we learned. We learned it like a trade, like a carpenter or whatever, like, this is good acting from watching other people act. Yeah.
exactly. And I feel like this may not be true. I know we're around the same age, but coming
Please don't
out
out
of
my age, Calvin. I'm a mystery to them. I could be. Sometimes I'm like, I've been doing it for 20 years. They're like, "Are you 60?" Like, it's just not. Nobody really knows, and I like it that way. I play 30 to 60 on television. What I say?
okay, oh yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. I will say, even since graduating grad school, when I was 30 years old, I was going out for 19 to
Right.
40. Very weird.
Calvin's like bragging for it. He
Um,
goes to the gym. He's lithe. He's a gymnast. He looks like he's 19. We get it. We get it. It's
Also
fine.
looks like he's
Also
40.
could be 40. That's true. Yeah. That's right.
um, but what I kind of realized was once I had graduated and I had done many, many parts without lines
Mm-hmm.
or just a couple of lines, as this was connected to a professional theater where they were hiring people from LA, New
Yep.
York, Chicago. I found out about the Actors Theater of Louisville apprenticeship
Uh-huh.
through someone who had graduated a year before me. So I was like, oh, that might be like a great opportunity for me to kind of lean more into acting technique,
Yep.
and whatever else I didn't know. The only thing I knew that I needed was acting technique. I didn't know anything about voice and speech. I didn't
Yep.
know, you know. So I auditioned for that program, which was like kind of like a scary thing within itself. It was like a whole thing. Um, and I got in.
Mm-hmm.
Little did I know this program no longer exists,
Mm-hmm.
by the way. I don't know if you knew that,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it ended maybe 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might sound right. Um, but I also didn't get what I was going there to get again,
Yep.
although it was more observation as an apprenticeship,
Yep.
in the apprenticeship, and they had open rehearsals. So even during the Humana Festival, where they had like 5 plays going on, we were able in our free time to sit in
Mm-hmm.
some of these rehearsal studios. It was an invaluable
Yep.
experience. Um, from there, we had a showcase. I got an agent. I moved to New York maybe a week later, and I just kind of hit the ground running. And actually didn't even apply for grad school until 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I got to New York, it was 12.
So a couple years out of school, then we're getting to Juilliard. I want to get to MFA, but I'm also kind of curious, speaking to many of our listeners and a lot of their parents who, these are often 16, 17, sometimes they're 13, 14 in considering this process, but often pretty young in the world thinking, I know I want to do this, or I think I'm interested in doing this. I guess I'm kind of
Mhm.
curious of like, what was your experience? What was holding you back and from doing it? Given, I guess it's interesting to me that when you told your mom, "I want to do theater," your mom was like, "Thank God, this is right for you." It's not like they were saying, "No, you can't do theater. Do something practical." It seems like.
Right.
What do you think inside you was making you say, "I don't know if that's something I really can do, or that's not something I necessarily want to do"? What took you to 1920? Do you feel like to realize this is something that could be for me?
I think that I think it's a couple of things. I think one, so I grew up in a very middle class
Hmm.
family, um, with a mom at home, dad
Hmm.
worked. But I will always, not a but I will always be grateful that my parents were always very encouraging of whatever it is I wanted to
Yeah.
do. Um, my mom, having not gone to college, my dad also did not go to college. So I think the fact that I was going was just exciting.
Hmm.
It was expected. I was a good student. I was a A B
Hmm.
student. Um, and but in terms of like going becoming an actor, it just felt like this ethereal thing
Hmm.
that happened because you got discovered walking in a
Right.
mall, or like especially like in the 90s you heard a lot of those
Yeah.
kinds of
You
stories
want
being
Star Search
discovered.
to happen. It wasn't going to happen through an MFA. Yeah.
Right, I thought it was going to be like, oh, you either like get on some talent
Hmm.
show, or I just never thought that it was something that could be studied. um I will also say in high school, this is no shade to my high school director, Chris Luter. He was fantastic. But he warned us that if you were going to college, going to the University of Tennessee may not be the best thing because they don't take their undergrads
Hmm.
seriously. I didn't know what he meant. And even when I switched my major to theater, I still don't know if I would say that that's
Hmm.
true. That felt like absolutely not my
Hmm.
experience at all. I felt like I was taken very seriously, um, and I had a lot of support from the faculty and staff there. I loved it, but I think it was this. I think being an actor felt um, like a thing of luck,
Hmm.
and not something that was a craft or a skill that could be learned. Um, it even felt, I mean, I was acting alongside people who worked regularly in regional
Hmm.
theater, but even then it felt like this odd thing. Like even when I was in it, I was like, but
Yeah.
how?
Yeah.
How? Um, but it's in the doing that you kind of figure it
Yeah.
out.
All right. Well,
And
let's
you're like,
get to
oh, this
Juilliard a
is
little bit.
pretty
So I'd love to hear.
fun.
We've
Right.
had a couple people who've gone to Juilliard on the show. But I'd love to hear. As someone who came in, it seems like had not had a lot of training, and I think most people have not had a full BFA and then the MFA. Though I know some people do that. But I just love to hear like now as an older actor, and again, we won't give a specific age. We'll let you stay nebulous.
19
19
to
to 40.
40.
But as a little bit older going through that experience, how do you feel like you were able to appreciate the 4 years? And I guess, how did you come out different than you started? So just from the training itself, how do you feel like it changed you over the course of the 4 years?
One, I think it was my first year. My first year, we had this big meeting at the end of the year where the fourth years kind of imparted
Hmm.
wisdom, whatever, to everybody else. And I remember my good friend Mallory Portnoy. She was a fourth year, and she said, "Juilliard did not make me a better actor; it made me a smarter
Hmm.
actor." And
Smarter isn't better, Mallory? What the heck?
I,
Sounds like
and
that's not true then. If you're smarter, you're probably better. No, but continue. Sorry.
that's actually a really interesting point. I think, and what I think that she was getting at, and what I kind of have maintained and kind of held on to, is that you come in to any of these programs with a certain amount of natural
Hmm.
talent, right? Um, And then what these schools are able to provide to you, and what I feel like I got from Juilliard, were ways in
Mhm.
with tools, right? A tool belt, but ways to kind of like step in to use those tools when my talent isn't really serving
Uh-huh.
me anymore, right? When there's, you know, I don't know, a character that I can't quite grasp an understanding of, or, I think I'm a wonderful note
Mhm.
taker, like being able to take notes and then execute.
Mhm.
I may not always get it right, but I will always change. There's just like things that I feel like have made it easier to like do
Yep.
auditions, particularly for
Yep.
theater. Um, Juilliard, I think, also gave me a sense of
Yep.
rigor that it sometimes I don't like to say that like this is a hard industry, this is a da, 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 because it's not going to be
Right.
that for everybody. For most of us, it will be for
Yep.
sure. It's a hustle. It is a grind. It is a lot of that. Um, but Juilliard had, I don't know how it is now, but back when I was there, I was on the tail end of the real rigorous uh I don't even know what word I'm trying to think of right now. Uh
You're talking about, like, the curriculum? The sequencing of yeah.
yeah, yeah, thank you. I feel like that I was on the tail end of the
Yep.
rigorous curriculum that it's
Yep.
known for.
And now you feel like it's
And I think that
slightly softened or slightly changed some of
I
the
think it
rigor.
softened
Yep.
a lot. I think a lot of it had to do with, and rightly so in some ways, but in some ways not
Mhm.
so much. I think there are, and I've been back a handful of times, either to talk or to just
Yep.
observe. And the things that I feel like were big helps were the long
Yep.
days, the amount of
Yep.
classwork, the lack of days off. Um, and yes, it is kind of like this microcosm of like what your life could be like once you leave. It's very much the same, except now in life you've got you're back to your social
Uh-huh.
life, you're back to a day job. You're auditioning, you're navigating relationships with your
Yep.
reps if you have them, you're trying to figure out how to get in room. I mean, it's a rigor, it's a different type
Yep.
of rigor, but it still takes a
Yep.
lot out of you.
No,
But yeah, I would say that I got my money's worth, and to follow my friend Mallory, it made me a smarter
I
actor as opposed to changing something
I
about
really love hearing that,
myself
and
that.
here I am mocking poor Mallory, even though I think I agree with the larger point there, which is like I think especially at a place like Juilliard, and people would say this about a Carnegie Mellon or a lot of places where they go, this is very difficult to get in. There's a storied history. Man, all those people seem so good. I think sometimes people will think it's like you come to school and then they give you the magic sauce. Especially people who haven't been to those programs will be like, there's a magic well that you drink from and talent springs up out of you. And you're saying, I don't think that is true. I mean, certainly I think they're bringing in talented people. That tends there is a barrier to entry. And so there's often a level of talent that already comes in. But your experience was more, it's like carving away parts of yourself to reveal talent as opposed to them pouring talent into you and maybe some technique on top to go right, how do I get through some of these moments, so here's some tricks, here's some tips, but which you could get many places. It's not certainly unique to a Juilliard or that kind of school. um
That's right. I want to say this too. I don't always think they pick. I don't think these schools always pick the people with the most
mm-hmm,
talent. I think that I think they're picking
mm-hmm,
companies, and I think within that, I think a smart, professor or someone who's an administrator of these schools will know that you also have to think about personality dynamics, because these are people who are going to be spending day in and day out long
mm-hmm.
days with each other. But what I do think is that the people must be
Yep.
teachable.
Yep.
Because, and I say this too to say like, and at Juilliard, you could have, some of my favorite and most talented classmates
Yep.
aren't working,
For sure.
you know, and vice versa. Some of the more lazy people that I knew
And
work
let's
all the,
name those people. Here we
it
are,
it
Calvin.
just
Let's name those people. These three people are
right. They are, but I say that to say that um a lot of things
For
are
sure.
crapshoots, and sometimes these schools make
For
mistakes in
sure.
people that they
Well, the
bring in,
crapshoot,
and so,
they have
there's
the industry itself,
yeah,
but also, I mean, I've had the little bit of the experience on the other side of the table running MTCA and seeing the kind of talent, and we'll talk about you as you apply to a company like this. But like, every time we do auditions, we could cast our coaches 10 times over talent wise. There's so much talent. I mean,
sure.
and I know that's true, especially when you talk about these top end schools. They all could fill their classes many times over from a talent perspective. So, it's not that it's completely subjective. Of course, I think there is such a thing as this person is farther along in their skill set than somebody else. But, I don't think it's like the top 20 people make this 20 school and then the next 20 make this school. It doesn't work numerically that way, at least from my perspective. Even if I could rank it myself, I wouldn't necessarily pick my top 20 numerical auditions to fill out a class.
Yeah, I mean, my one of my closest friends from my group, was on a wait
Yep.
list, and to me, she was one of the more
Yep.
talented people in my group. It
Yep.
just
You don't
you
know.
don't know.
All right. Well, so then let's jump through. You got your money's worth, and then you also kind of graduated. It seems like from the outside perspective into the truest dream of pretty quickly booking your first Broadway show, which in fact, that started as an off Broadway show, right? So you booked it, yeah, at the
Yeah,
public, and that's
that's right.
into Broadway. Is that right? Okay, so
Mhm,
tell me
mhm.
about that experience of what everyone would dream of is pretty quickly out of school. I have a show. Oh my gosh, I'm on Broadway. Like, was it from the showcase at Juilliard that we now have new agents? Did you stick with your same agents that you already had from Louisville? What was that experience of sort of how you navigated launching into the business itself?
Yeah, so no, I did not keep it's funny. So when I left, I signed with this agent, right out of Actors
Hmm.
Theater of Louisville, moved to New York, and I was bussing tables at Del Frisco's. Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't a server, I was actually
Yep.
I was a busser. Um, and during that time, I was being sent auditions, but I think in the year that my first year in New York, I think I only went out from my agent maybe
Hmm.
14 times, which I don't know. I have the only thing I have to compare it to now are
Right.
the reps that I have now. So I'm not sure like what
I
is
think
if
that's
that's like a
not
normal
atypical.
number or what. It did not
Right. That's a
work for
terrifying
me.
number to hear, but I think plenty of people, of course, go out a lot more than that. But there are definitely actors who
Yeah.
go, once a month is not that unusual. Sadly true, but I
Yeah.
think that can be true.
So I mean, what I knew at 23, whatever, I was like,
Yeah.
this isn't working for me. And I also don't know if I'm doing this
Yep.
well. So I dropped them, which was a
Yep.
very frightening thing to do. As young as I was, I didn't have any other prospects for representation. And that's actually when I decided
Yep.
to go to school. And then so those 4 years went by, and then we did have showcase. Um, I knew so we had a showcase in New York and LA. I knew that I wanted my reps to be
Yep.
based in New York. So I was able to make my decision pretty quickly, which for me was I think it was a very
Yep.
smart thing to do because once we got to LA, I just did the showcase I mean, not to get reps, but just to show the
Yep.
industry that I'm here, whatever. And then that way, my reps in New York were able to set me up with meetings that I otherwise
Right.
would not
Because you'd
have
already signed on with
gotten
them.
had
Yeah.
yeah. So that was really great. And then I came back to New York. I kind of started working kind of
Yep.
immediately. Um, my first thing was like a one line in a indie feature, and it graduated in May. And then I did a tour with the public. It was they did like their first mobile unit
Yep.
national tour. I did that of Sweat, and then things just kind of kept going. I didn't get I got Fat Ham December of
Mm-hmm.
2021. Um, and then I had to get my first day job
Mm-hmm.
in a while, which I had for 3 months, and then we
Mm-hmm.
started the production in March, rehearsal in March. Broadway didn't happen for another six
Uh-huh.
months after that, but we knew we were going to Broadway maybe a week or two
Uh-huh.
before we
What
closed
a dream.
off Broadway.
What a dream. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not typical that you do an off-Broadway show and it just goes. I think a lot of people are like, it's going, we think it's going, we're just looking for a theater. And then more often than not, it's like, oh, it didn't actually end up going.
That's exactly what we said. It was
Mhm.
like, we're looking for a theater, we're looking for more producers. So in my mind, I was like,
Yep.
just pretend like it's
Until
not
those lights are up.
happening
Yeah,
until you
that's
know
right. I love that. Well, and I really love what you said, in terms of what is typical and atypical. I know, of course, you only know your own experience, but, you know, the idea of like, I didn't know if I was doing well or not before this, but with the first agents,
Yeah.
I think that's a really common and kind of surprising experience for young actors because you're so used to
Mhm.
feedback, especially if you go to a BFA program, you're getting like constant feedback on your work. And it's a very odd thing then, I think, whether you have an agent or manager, I think very often you're not getting tons of feedback. You can get some, you can certainly ask, hey, can I ask casting how I did or what the reasoning was, but I feel like so often the feedback is unhelpful, or I don't even know if it's sometimes true of like, we went with this person because of this. And you're like, how do I use that? That's not really about my acting technique that they're giving me notes or whatever. So I kind of wonder, did you feel like, other than of course booking, which is positive feedback in that way, with your new reps, were you getting the kind of feedback that you needed in terms of like at least your career trajectory? Maybe you didn't need the same artistic feedback, having already graduated from Juilliard and feeling a little more confident, but did you feel like that feedback mechanism was better in this sort of second round of things?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
it was different. So when I signed,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm with Paradigm for my agent and 360 Entertainment for management. And when I signed with Paradigm, um, my agent, I love my reps. I just want to say
Great.
that.
I
I
mean, not
love
every
them
actor. I
so
mean,
much.
people on this pod probably
We're
will say it
all
more
like,
often than, but not every actor is going to say that with their reps and going, "I love them." Yeah, yeah,
oh, no, 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 not at all. We're all like around the same age. I love them. But Matt told me, and I had a couple of other point people at the time. Both of them
hmm
have since left Paradigm, but so I just have Matt now. But he told me, the goal in this year
right.
is not to book. And in my head,
Like
I'm
that's
like,
my goal.
what? I'm
Everybody's
like,
goal.
I'm like, that's my goal. I don't know what the goal is, but my goal
Yeah,
is to book. And it's a really smart, later on, it didn't take me long to figure out the intelligence behind that. But
yeah,
it's literally like, we don't know where you're gonna land. You're
right.
new to the industry. You're gonna be auditioning for, you know, you're gonna be going against your type, but people who are already celebrities. You're gonna be
Yep,
auditioning for people who just are out of grad school like yourself. Yeah, I mean, the it's gonna run the gamut. We don't know where
yep,
you're gonna fall. We're gonna see, is it gonna be like mostly regional theater? Da, 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 da. So that was like the first thing that I kind of held on to. And then I would say the follow up kind of feedback. So I would go back, I would ask kind of frequently in the beginning, how am I
hmm
doing? Da, 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 da. They're like, Calvin, you're being brought back in over and over by,
yep.
these casting people. That's the feedback. The feedback
That's the
is
good feedback. Yep,
they're interested in you. You have something that they want to
yep,
help. They want to put you somewhere, you know.
yep,
So that was the next kind of level where I was like, okay, I'm getting repeat callbacks. Well, callbacks, yes, but also
right.
they're asking me in for different projects.
Yep,
Um,
that's it.
and then I would ask about how I did in a room, right? Which has morphed, and I'll get to that, to like what I do
Yep,
now. But so I used to call and be like, did they say anything like da, 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 da? And they're like, yeah, you did great. There's nothing that there's, they think you're wonderful, blah,
yep.
blah, blah, blah. What that has morphed into over, and I've been graduated now for 6 years.
hmm
What that has morphed into is my agents calling me
Uh
and
huh.
being like, how was it?
Uh huh.
And my saying, I think I did really great. I feel
Uh
good
huh.
about how I showed up in the room.
Uh huh.
The work that I did, I could have taken this note a little bit further, I think, but I think overall I had a great showing. I
Uh
never
huh.
ask for feedback anymore.
Uh-huh. Well,
One,
to Mallory's point, you've become a smarter actor. Now you are able to go, all right, I can analyze it myself. And almost certainly your analysis of your own performance is going to be better than what the casting is going to come back from, of like all the different things they were thinking about. They weren't all thinking about your performance.
absolutely,
So then now you're actually helping your agent to go, oh, you made a great impression in that room. That's good. That's good knowledge for us to know.
right. And the it's not crazy. I think it's to your point. I now have gotten to a point where in those moments where they do call or text or email and ask me how an
Hmm.
audition went, it's because one, they really like me and they're really interested. Like
Yep.
I would say they're my friends as well.
Yep.
That I do pay out of my, out of my thing. We work together. They don't work
Yep.
for me. I think we work together, but they're really interested. And most times, Charlie, I'm not kidding. I book it. If
Yep.
if if I say like,
If you think you crushed it.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, your gauge has become accurate. You go, I know that was a really good audition. Doesn't mean you know for sure, but
right.
you feel
The
good. You felt the energy in
the
the room.
win though is that I feel good
Yeah.
about
That's
how I went in the room. It's not, and it kind of, I mean, this is how it kind of went with Cabaret. We can talk about that later, but
talking about it
it
next. Yeah.
it literally has it is truly how I feel about my work in the room and how well I play in the room.
Yep.
That to me is like where my wins are. The
Yep.
and I mean that honestly. I don't mean that in like a as a coach, as
No,
a
but that's the you talk about control what you can control. You can control that. You can control what the artist I brought into the room. I can't control what happens behind the table after with the artistry I'm giving you, but I can control that. Did I show up with what I wanted to bring into the room? And that what else can you do?
exactly.
I do want to give a shout out to your agent. This is your second agent here, with Paradigm. The gift that it is basically to tell you we trust you, don't worry about booking,
Mhm.
is like if only every young actor could get that. Because I think it's true more often than not that even if you're working with someone, let's say you're freelancing, or it's not necessarily the same, hey, this is a deep great connection, and we're giving you a year no matter what.
Mhm.
I do think most agents would say, I'll give them a couple cracks. They probably were nervous their first time or two, but I think a lot of young actors, they feel the pressure of like, if I don't book this now, my agent's not going to want to send me out for anything else.
Yeah.
And then they put too much stakes on it, that the result has to be about booking and not about their work in the room.
Yeah.
And then I think it can just makes their performances worse. That if you told yourself, even if it's not true, you almost lied to yourself and say, my agent said, don't worry about it for a year. Just have fun and knock out every audition out of the park.
Mhm.
Don't worry about booking. I think it would help actors with their actual performances to just be a little looser and not put that weight on themselves.
I think so too. And I think it's really on the reps
Yeah.
to be able to voice that, particularly if and Matt and Jess, my agent and manager respectively, they are also known to develop new talent,
Yeah.
right? So there's a also an understanding of that. But you could go to, I'm not going to name any agencies, but there are agencies that will drop you for not
Yep.
booking within a
For
certain
sure.
amount of time.
Of course.
But
Totally.
I think a smart agent and a smart agency will know that everybody's path is different,
Yep.
and where people land within this industry is going to be dependent on what parts are available. Like recently, my I I wanted to turn down this series regular audition. This was before, like maybe 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and he was like, Calvin. He called me. He was like,
Hmm.
Calvin, there are there have been four black male series regulars available for this upcoming season, and you've already auditioned for three. Can you give this a swing? And
Can you
I
give
was
it
like, you
let's
know
read
what?
it again.
Let's
Let's check out the script one more time. Can we make it work?
Can we
Yeah.
make it work? I was like, Matt, twist my arm. Let me
Yeah.
go ahead and get off book for this little
I love that.
thing.
I love it.
This
There
little-
have been four and you've auditioned for three. Yeah. I mean, I do think it's unfortunate. I mean, it's just the reality of so much of the sort of nature of a capitalist society, but it's like the reality is I think often at those higher level agencies where you're going to be often working with talent maybe who graduated from Juilliard and doesn't need the level of handholding that you got, that's
Mhm.
going to tend to be where you may find more of those people who are really patient and able to be artist centered and able to develop and say, you know what, I'm okay with developing for a year if you don't book,
Mhm.
and that's fine. it's unfortunate. I think some of the greener actors who tend to work with the kinds of agents, maybe at the lower levels, which are not necessarily going to, even if they understand that maybe their relationship, they're not going to necessarily have that the softness of that attitude and the care and the tenderness that I think it seems like you got from Matt, which is and Jazz seems like that was wonderful. But I wish that for all of young actors, and of course, it's not that those people only exist at Paradigm, but I definitely think you will have some experiences where the kind of people that you might have access to as a green actor off the bus might not be doing that quite as much. Might not be saying,
Yeah.
"Don't worry about it. We'll have a year and we'll work together, and this will be great." And
Yeah.
yeah,
I'll also
unfortunately,
say, like, Jess and Matt, I don't think they'll like that I say this, but I think it says a lot about them because I think that they really believe in my mind and my artistry. I don't make them the most money by far.
uh huh,
By far. They have, Jess rep Cynthia Erivo. Matt has Oscar winner. Like, they see something, and they have the roster to have
right.
me.
No, they can afford a passion project of going, I believe in Calvin. I do think maybe that's a future Oscar winner, but if not, he's going to have a wonderful artistic career that I'm going to be excited about. And not every young agent can do that. Not every agent gets in a
Right.
position to go, great, I'll invest a lot of time in this.
If I was to ever give advice about finding a rep, I would tell people, like, you really got to like them.
Yeah.
Like, you must like them.
Yeah.
Because these people, I mean, they're fighting for you day in and day out. Well, I feel like mine are fighting,
Yep.
even if they may not be making phone calls every day, but I feel like they are.
Yep.
Every time I call, they pick up.
Yep.
They don't. They send me a text like in 2 seconds. Like,
Yep.
I love my reps, but I think the thing is we have a genuine care for one another.
Yep. Well, there you go. You said if I were to ever give advice, and you did it. Let's talk about the cabaret experience a little bit. So, I want to specifically talk about, because here we are, all these minutes into the interview, we've not really said the word musical yet,
Yeah.
or talked about musical theater. And I know Fat Ham had some shimmying and some singing involved. There was a little, certainly play with music there.
Mhm.
But did you feel nervous at all, sort of crossing that barrier into a full musical? So both from the audition experience and then in the actual doing of it. What is that experience as someone who's certainly your training is more in the acting world than in the musical theater world?
Charlie, it's frightening. It was terrifying. I I've gotten right when I graduated, I got sent Hamilton twice to audition. And I was like, no. I actually can rap.
Hmm.
Like before undergrad, I did a lot of like hip hop plays, actually, like
Hmm.
workshops and readings. But singing was my one of my least favorite things to do at Juilliard. And we had to do a cabaret
Uh-huh.
in my third year. And in my review, and this is to my favorite teacher, least favorite class, favorite one of my favorite teachers
Hmm.
at FLAP, I said, this was the worst experience of my life. I hated this
Uh-huh.
experience of doing this cabaret. So this audition comes around for the original company.
Uh-huh.
And my agent calls because he knew he had to do a disclaimer because it was a musical.
Hmm.
And he was like, look, they're not looking for a Broadway singer.
Right.
They want an actor first. You do not have to be, in fact, a good singer to
Hmm.
do this part. And I was like, in my head, I was like, that don't make any sense. I was like, he
This is a
was like,
trick.
look, you don't have to audition for it, but it could be interesting. It's something
Hmm.
new. He was like, I think you can do it. Um, he was like, but it's completely up to you. I'm not going to push, whatever.
Hmm.
I was like, you know what? It scares me. So
Hmm.
I'll do it.
Hmm.
And so great. So he's ecstatic. He was like, have you ever seen it? I was like, no, I don't know anything about this. I have
Hmm.
never seen it. He was like, watch the Liza Minnelli, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. So I rented it on Amazon. I was like, I didn't finish it. I auditioned. It was a tape, sent in the tape, and didn't get a call back, nothing.
Hmm.
So I had talked to like another black queer actor friend who has been on Broadway musicals a few times, who
Mm-hmm.
also auditioned for it and got called back.
Mm-hmm.
And we were both just kind of like, oh, I think they're kind of probably looking for this thing. And I was like, I knew I wasn't gonna get it because, I don't do musical theater. And then it came back around, and a friend of mine booked it out to
Mm-hmm.
Benson Wood. And then I was like, oh, that totally makes sense. Like, Atu's great. And then it came back around for replacement
Mm-hmm.
cast. And my agent calls again. He was like, hey, they want to see you in person.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that makes no sense. I didn't even get a call back
Mm-hmm.
like for the original thing. Um, but I was like, he was like, you want to do it? I was like, yeah, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was something in me that was so like, this is so far fetched, and I'm not gonna get it. Um, and I'm scared to sing live in front of people.
Mm-hmm.
There was just all these factors that made me feel like it wasn't gonna happen.
Uh-huh.
So I got all the material, and I had like 2 weeks to prepare. So I did, and I felt good about it. They gave me an extra scene that they didn't give in the original when I auditioned for the original company.
Which you've never seen because you've never finished the show. So the
Never
brand
finished
cold
it.
to you.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, so I'm just gonna base everything on just like my instinct, like how I would want to play this character
Mm-hmm.
on my one read of the script. And I tried just not to give it a lot of weight. Went in, was so nervous. Um, as soon as the moderator came out, we like talked all the way down, totally cool, walked in. This was the most people I had
Uh-huh.
ever auditioned in front of.
Yeah, musical's different than a play in terms of the panel
Oh
behind there. Yeah.
my God. Plays, it'll be like three
Right.
people, I'd say on average.
Big Broadway play, maybe it's 4 or 5. It's different with producers
Maybe
back
4
there, but
or 5.
that's yeah.
Yeah, and a camera for like the three people that
Mm-hmm.
won't be there. I think, and I'm not exaggerating, I think there were 10 people
Yeah.
in the room. Uh so did one scene, got some notes, did it again, did the second scene, got some notes, did it again, sang the song, got some notes, sang it again. And in the room, they were very much like, how are you feeling? It's like, I'm feeling good. I was like, I am not a singer. Just so we know. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, you don't really have to. It's da 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 da. And then I sang, and she was like, you can sing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, but like,
Right. There's
y'all are
difference between a
Broadway.
singer and a
You
singer. I
know a
can
singer.
sing, but then there's singer. My
Y'all
wife is
know
a
people
singer.
can
There's like,
sing.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, and then we didn't get to the third scene,
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, that's fine. But I was in there for a long time. Um, and I left, and I was like, hey, I think I did pretty
I
good.
did it. I auditioned for a musical.
I
Yeah.
really felt good about that. Um, and then my agent called, or my agent texted me. He was like, "How did it go?" I was like, "I think I did really well. I'm very proud of like what I did."
Mm-hmm.
And my manager hit me up as well, and I told her. And then I got a call the next day from my agent, and he said, when I left the room, Rebecca Frecknell, the director, turned to Bernie Telsey and said, well, that was easy.
Wow.
And I was like, great. He was like, you didn't book it. We don't know yet. He was like, but that was what was said in the room. He was like, so they're going to be auditioning for the Sally Bowles character coming up, and, we'll let you know about callbacks and
Mm-hmm.
everything like that. By this time, I had another job that I was doing on Little Island, and then still hadn't heard anything. Then I went to London to do a workshop, came back, still nothing, picked back up with the Little Island project. And then one day I got a call. This was a month later, Charlie. And my agent was like, how do you feel about going to Berlin? And I was like, oh, is there another workshop? Because I
Mm-hmm.
had just got
Mm-hmm.
back from London. And he was like, no, you're going to be in Cabaret.
Wow.
And I lost it. I
Wow.
lost it. And
Still
that's
still
how,
no callback. Didn't get a callback from the video, didn't get a callback from the live audition, just book.
no callback.
That's amazing. I mean,
I
that is
was
like
like,
the dream
"Wait."
of an audition anytime afterward if they can say, "Well, that was easy." Like that you've done your job if they're like, "Well, okay, done."
It was shocking, and this whole time I'm waiting for callback.
Yeah,
And in my head, I was like, "Oh, it'll probably be like some sort of chemistry
right.
thing where
They
it's
gotta
like
find their
a
people
bunch of
first, you 2
Calvins and
together.
like a
Yeah.
bunch of whoever's, and we're like
Uh,
matching and
yep.
doing all of this."
Uh,
But no, it was like
that's
one and
amazing. That's
done.
a great story, and I'd love to hear a little bit, like, from your perception, at least, of those 10 people behind the table, 'cause, we've had a number of actors on this pod who's done that, who've studied MFA in acting or BFA in acting and that have, sort of ended up doing musicals. How do you kind of perceive the, like, porous membrane of it all, of how porous it is? I guess, how are you perceive when you say, "I'm not a singer," which I wouldn't necessarily volunteer in the room before singing, but fine. But when you say that, like, do you think they are looking at the world of singer and non-singer in the way that, often I'll talk on the podcast of like you're choosing with the degree of BFA acting or BFA MT, but once you graduate, they don't necessarily split you that way in their heads.
Right.
How do you sort of perceive casting and how that looks, as you've been now as you're seen for a musical? Now you're in a musical.
Yeah. For this, sometimes you get an audition and they may be like, "Oh, this person doesn't have to be good at fill in the
Right.
blank." I always think that's a lie. But what I've come to realize was that the detail and the nuance of the direction and just the work in general of this production was that was a truism.
Mm-hmm.
It was absolutely true that this character does not know that he's in the way that it's being directed and the way
Uh-huh.
he does not know that he's in a musical, and he happens to decide to play ball with Sally Bowles
Mm-hmm.
for this perfectly marvelous,
Mm-hmm.
what is it, 12, 16 bars,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Um, but there was a lack of believability in that, especially because Atu can sing.
Uh-huh.
Atu sings as a Broadway.
Uh-huh.
He can sing for
Mm-hmm.
Broadway through and through. But what they were really looking for also was someone who could tell a story through
Yep.
song, um, and someone who could act, and someone who can
Yeah.
act. Um, I didn't necessarily believe that, which is why I made this disclaimer in the room. And I also felt like I had nothing to lose because I was never gonna audition for a musical
Yep.
anyway. So the likelihood that Telsey was gonna bring me back in for a musical was probably not gonna
And
happen.
now it's
And
coming,
I didn't
Calvin.
care. I
Now the
like that
next
was
3
no
jobs are Broadway musicals, I'm telling you. Once you're in, you're in. You're gonna get
once
more of these calls.
I believe
Yeah.
this. And now what I've come to understand is that trying to be careful before I say this, but I'm going to say it. I think that there is something for everyone.
Mhm.
I think you have to stick it out long enough.
Mhm.
But as someone who really did not think that there was a place for me in musical theater, only this year was it, let's say that it was possible for a black man to play Cliff
Uh-huh.
Bradshaw on
Uh-huh.
Broadway. This is like the first time this has happened. But had I quit, I would have never
Yep.
known that this could have been possible. And also that, you know, as long as you can carry a tune in a
Yep.
bucket and you can tell a story through song, there could be a place
Yep.
for you. And if that can happen for me, it can happen for anybody. And now I'm actually kind of interested in leaning into getting a voice
I was just
coach.
gonna ask,
And
yeah, are you thinking about maybe trying to sharpen the I mean, we watched
oh
Lin-Manuel
yeah,
was not the greatest singer when he started his musical career. He got better and better
no,
and better and made a career for himself, so, yeah.
yeah. So now I'm betting with myself
Mm.
for myself, uh, in a way that I never really thought. I had always said to myself, I want to do one musical before I like retire from this whole
Mhm.
thing, something regional perhaps. Um, but I would like to do a musical at some point, and then this popped
Mhm.
up. And gratefully, it's the perfect thing to kind of dip my toe
Mhm.
in as I sing like the very beginning of Willkommen at the
Mhm.
end in the finale, and then just I have my perfectly
Mhm.
marvelous, you know,
Couple bars. Couple bars. And this is
moment. Yeah, a
regional.
couple
This
parts.
is a region, this is just the New
It
York
is a region.
region. Come on.
Very
It's regional
true.
theater.
And I will say, not to knock regional theater at all, because I saw Tommy. on Broadway, and I saw a regional production. I preferred the regional
Hey,
production.
now you're tearing down MTCA's own Tommy there. Okay, so just we got to be careful with Ali Lewis Borski's a podcast guest. Come on, MTCA alum. Though you're also, way to mention, you're with MTCA alum Marty Lauder in this production as well. So we're just got to
Love
cross
them
board.
so much.
Come on.
Love Marty.
All right, let's take a quick break, and on the back end, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of these conversations about type and different roles that you can play. So back in a flash. All right, we're back with the amazing Calvin Leon Smith, and I promise we're going to talk a little bit about type. We've been doing a bit of a runner on this recently. We kind of did a 3 or 4 episodes. We were talking about type in season 1, and we kind of gave it a rest, and then we kind of been reviving it. We had a great conversation last week with Marcus Martin about it. He's playing the genie in Aladdin. And so again, for any of our newer listeners, we're going to give the caveat that any conversation about type, we're really talking specifically about the industry and not the college process. You've heard it before if you're a regular listener. We're firm believers at MTCA that in the college process, it is all about bringing in your own authentic artistry without worrying about kind of solving the equation for the colleges. But you're just there wrestling with the questions as honestly as you can. Okay, caveat given there. I'd love to hear a little bit about your kind of personal relationship with this. You know, as you're talking to your reps and as you're graduating school and you're thinking about, hey, we're going to use this first year to figure out where I fit in the world. How are you thinking about branding and marketing yourself? You know, you obviously had that really quick success. Were you thinking, hey, I think I'm going to fit in this lane. I'm going to try throw spaghetti against a wall, see what sticks. What was your sort of perception of how you were going to use your own brand or your own type, or however you're thinking of it that way?
I didn't. Oh, this is a very good question, Charlie. So
I'm here for, Calvin. You wait till about the hour mark, and then I bring out the good questions. You know, I'll
I'm trying
soften you up, and then bam.
um so when I first got out of school, I had this idea that I was only going to be doing things that really made me feel like an artist and
Mm-hmm.
that were not necessarily going to stretch me, but things that I felt like I could fall into naturally and things that excited me,
Mm-hmm.
things that, and I don't think I was wrong. I don't think I was wrong for that, for feeling that and for operating in that way. There was pushback from my reps about it,
Yep.
which I've come to, and now that I'm a bit older, I've come to understand the why behind it. But I feel like I am very much an artist first, which
Mm-hmm.
makes this industry a little bit more difficult for me,
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways. But in terms of type, I never really gave it that much weight
Mm-hmm.
or value. Um, what I and I say that because nowadays, in my experience of this industry professionally, things are not as clear cut as they used to be.
For sure.
So, I mean, I've auditioned for things in which they didn't care if it was man, woman, gender
Yep.
non-conforming, trans. They didn't care. It was just like, this is the
Right.
person. And so, like, so many people auditioned for this part. It was
Yep.
in fact, it was a series regular,
Yep.
this particular thing. So, I mean, that's an extreme example. I don't know how many other parts I've auditioned that were quite like that,
But you would
but
not have seen that 20 years ago. I mean, that would
no,
no.
not at
They
all.
might have
I don't
said we're looking at different races for this, and that would have been it. Like it would, but it wouldn't have been like races, genders, ages. I mean, that's a pretty
right.
specific and newer idea.
Yeah. And I, yes, I mostly audition for parts that are exclusively for Black American men.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't fully have trust in the industry to view, various groups of people of differing identities with a lot of nuance
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times. So I do get a lot of the same types of things. And this is not an agent or manager thing.
Sure.
It is like what is
Yep.
available,
How
what
people
people are
feel.
writing, and what is being asked to be produced. So I still get, you know, drug dealers, gang members.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, this past year, I think there were 2 auditions in which I hit a woman.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like these types of things that are very antithetical to what I think I play well
Mm-hmm.
and also what I'm interested in. I also will say this desire to like fight against kind of that broad idea of a type of person has led me to parts that we typically would not see Black men play. I've been a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
I've been a swimming coach.
Mm-hmm.
Those two are breaking ideas about Black men right now.
Yep.
People say Black men don't go to therapy and Black people can't swim.
Yep.
So just even that by itself, I feel like was breaking against type. But I think it's because my persistence in saying like I do not want to play this type of
Uh-huh.
person. It is also something that if I was to play, and I will say it's not because I don't think that I can, but in order to play it in a believable way, I need more time.
Uh-huh.
And for especially for television and film, it can be the audition turnover so
Oh yeah.
quick
Yep.
that I don't have time to do the type of work that I would need to play those types of characters
Yep.
believably. So for me, I'd rather not waste the time
Yep.
of putting on something that I don't feel great about because I wasn't able to put the time and the work into. Um,
No, that totally makes sense. But just to be clear, those are which kinds of roles are these now roles that you're saying? Hey, you know what? I'm actually not going to submit that self tape because that feels too far from my lived experience, or that feels like that's not something that I could see myself wanting to play to be representing on screen. Or so, what does that mean in terms of actuality? If an audition like that comes in, do you say no? That's not something I want to do.
yes, and it's usually about how I feel like it represents Black
Uh huh.
folks, or if, and it doesn't have to be close to my lived experience. That's not a
Yep.
requirement, but I have to believe
Uh
me
huh.
when I say the words out
Yep.
loud. That's the thing that I get the most frustrated with when I get a script and I'm like, like this, it could be a curse word. I'm like, this doesn't sound right coming out of
Uh
my
huh.
mouth. Now, what I have begun to do, and this is another thing that people are like, what? I will edit
Yep.
sides. I will cut sides. I will move dialogue. I will cross out words. But this is something new that I learned from an actor friend of
Yep.
mine who books regularly from and does this
Yep.
regularly. I don't do it that regularly. Um, but it has also helped me to begin to go in for things that I might not necessarily feel right for. But then I have like switched
Yep.
words,
You'd be like,
taken
this
things
is my
out.
version of it. If you might cast me, this is what it would look like, probably.
Exactly,
I think that's
exactly.
so smart. Yeah, a question almost exactly that of like how we approach that as actors, because it does feel like it's we don't have the choice of what we audition for. We can say no to auditions, but we can't just say I want to audition for this and get that audition always. And we also don't get to make the cast. We don't write the casting breakdown, so we don't get to say wonder if they would consider looking at me for this, or they wouldn't
Mhm.
consider what other types of people they'll consider identity wise when they're looking at stuff. But I think there's something so interesting about there's almost a version of what the college advice we give of like bringing your authentic self to the room of like as much as you can bend to what the part is asking for but fit within something you're like this is believably how I would do it, especially for TV. I'm like that's how it's going to be. Like there are times when I'll be coaching my wife, I'll be doing an audition, and it'll just be like it feels like too much of a stretch. It's not that it's not even not good, but I'm like if they want that, it's not going to be you. Like if they want that, it's somebody else. Like if it's
Right.
supposed to be wants to be older, if you need to act like a different almost sometimes there'll be a dialect that I'm like that just feels like if they want that, it's not going to look like you probably.
Y I am okay, I will say this too, I say no a
Hmm.
lot. I pass on auditions a lot. Um, this has changed the older I get. It's becoming more now I'm like, okay, retirement, health insurance, these things have gotten really
Yep.
important to me over the last
Yep.
year.
You're almost
Again,
65
I'm
now,
19
so
to
it's fine. Yeah,
40.
exactly. As you
Right,
hit your
right.
60s, retirement really creeps up on you.
But I've been really thinking about that, more so, um, but it is the greatest tool that we have. I was doing this, doing this TV show in Atlanta, and my one of the guys that I was acting with, we were being picked up from the hotel and taken to set together every day. And he's older than me and really well established. And I was telling him how, like, about these problems that these with the industry
Mm-hmm.
and like not wanting to audition and blah, blah, blah. He said, for certain parts, and he said, everything you say yes to opens doors and closes
Mm-hmm.
doors, and everything you say no to does the exact same
Mm-hmm.
thing. And he gave me this example of a movie that he was so he's an actor, writer, producer, and he was like, they wanted Chris Hems. I get these men mixed up. Whoever was Superman.
Oh, that's not Hemsworth. That's oh, nah. I'm not gonna get there. Yeah,
Okay,
one of the Superman.
great.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, you know.
He was like, they wanted this guy. Let's say Chris Hemsworth. Sorry, Chris,
Yeah,
it's
it's
not
a
you. It's somebody
hot
else.
Evans,
Evans.
Chris Evans. Was he Superman?
You know
I think he
what?
was Star
Let's
Trek.
stop
That's
trying
another
to.
20 minutes of us being like, which one was in the Galaxy
Which
movie? Which
one
one
was?
was Carson Wentz?
So somebody in the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't Superman. It was somebody in the MCU actually. And he was like, they wanted him to play the lead of his movie, and he was like, I don't want people coming to see the superhero.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to come to see this movie because they're drawn to the
Yeah.
story of what it is. And and he was like, and I have a friend who was on Hawaii Five-O. Cannot
Mm-hmm.
work. People don't want this, the type of work he now wants to do. They don't want to see him
Mm-hmm.
for, they don't want to see him for because he did this thing and that's what he's known
Uh-huh.
for. Now, I'm not in that place. I even have a hard time being like, I feel like a successful actor, but I I think that because of my resume, I think looks how it does because of how decisive I
Uh-huh.
was, um, and still kind of am with a lot of more caveats
Yep.
now. I'm saying yes to more auditions than I ever have. Um, but that has more to do with
Yep.
age. I feel like if I was still in my 20s, I would still probably be very
Well,
picky, a
and
little bit more
it's such an
picky. But
interesting
that's just
way of
me.
saying yes too. It's rather than saying no, I won't play this role. You're sort of saying, hey, this is what it would look like. Maybe this character that you've written this way would have a little bit more redemptive quality, or there's a more integrity, or it's coming. This is just how Calvin would bring his own artistry to this role. You're giving them a legitimate
Right.
option without rather than saying no. So it's like a version of saying yes, but or whatever, or almost a yes and,
Yeah,
but like yes, and also it would look like this if I were to say do it.
truly. And now I'm kind of in a space where my auditions aren't about the
Yep.
audition. It's about like, well, I'm just going to ignore the character
Right.
description and I'm going to do my thing. And like I said, it's about like, if I don't feel like the dialogue sounds human to me or sounds honest out of my mouth, I'm going to
Yep.
change it up a little bit.
It's essentially wrapping back a little bit to those early days with your 14 auditions a year and sort of introducing yourself to the industry. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that in your first auditions you're making a lot of edits in the scripts and stuff as you're doing
No,
stuff.
no, I would not
But
say that. Do
I
that.
do
Don't do
think there's
that.
something to that idea though of like it's always a tricky balance. All of this stuff's a tricky balance. What we're suggesting even here is a tricky balance, but it's like there's a tricky balance between how well would I do at booking this role, which of course you're trying to book, and introducing yourself as an artist, where if you find yourself putting yourself into the box of what you think the role is, and then this is the first time and maybe the only time casting is going to bring you in, if they've never really gotten to meet you and what you do uniquely, there's a sadness there too, especially as a young artist where you're going, this is my time meeting Chelsea. This is my time meeting whoever this casting person is. And I want to show what Calvin does. I want to show what Charlie does, even if I'm not sure that's quite right for the role. It's a tricky balance of like, am I trying to book this or am I trying to show myself and my skills and my artistry for all the other roles that could it be?
Right. And I mean, on the other side of that too, you can be wrong for a part, like clearly, I think, but a casting person can say they're
Yep.
good. They're not right for
Yep.
this, but I
But I'll
will
say that
find
skill. I'd
something else
rather
for
see
them.
you do something you do well than try to badly fit into a role that you probably aren't going to book anyway because it's not yours. Yep.
Yeah,
All right. Can we make a little pivot to some MTCA coaching experience? Can we talk a little MTCA?
please.
So we've had a few
Yeah.
old heads on the pod, not necessarily older than you. We're not talking about ages, but some real vets who've been, 10 years plus on the pod. We had one brand new coach at the time who had just started. But here you are, you have your sea legs under yourself. We got a couple years, down in terms of the process, but you don't have that 10-year chip with us yet. I just
Right.
love to hear like, What have you learned about the BFA MT process as someone who didn't go through it yourself in terms of the BFA MT or even the BFA acting audition process in college? What have you learned from your first few seasons of getting to sort of participate and be part of and coach young people through this experience?
It is extremely competitive. I wasn't aware at the level of competition going into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, within that too, it is, I feel like if I was auditioning for BFA now, with the knowledge that I have, I would also be auditioning for several schools.
Uh-huh.
I think it's kind of, I think it's extremely important. Um, I also have learned that these students really want it. They're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say by and large, uh, they know their musical theater in and out. Um, they may not know where they want to go to school a lot of times, which I think is great to just like remain open to the process of it
Mm-hmm.
all. But the desire to be a musical theater performer and to be on Broadway or to do certain shows is really admirable, I think, especially at 16, 17,
Mm-hmm.
18 years old. I didn't have that
Mm-hmm.
uh, foresight about what I wanted to do. Um, and I will also say, like, I didn't. Musical theater people are also some of the hardest working people
Uh-huh.
that I have ever met. I am always shocked at some of my students, particularly around pre-screen season, where they're in a show, they also have like dance class or like voice class, they have other coaches
Mm-hmm.
for other, thing, and they still manage to show up. Like I'm floored by that. I rarely have people ask to reschedule,
Uh-huh.
and they will show up. They might be tired,
Uh-huh.
they might be a little under the weather, they may not have even gone to school that day because of that,
Mm-hmm.
but these students show up.
That's awesome. So true.
They show up. Um, yeah,
Yeah. I'll say when we first interviewed you, you came, of course, with a glowing recommendation from one of our favorite people. And the thing that
yeah.
stuck out is that recommendation, which is unusual. We often hear about people's talent and how good we think they'd be. But it was his description of your heart and your passion for teaching and passing it on to the next generation. Obviously, a lot of people want to do this job. I mentioned we can cast multiple times over from a talent perspective. I think it is a great gig to get to work with talented young students and pay the bills, not waiting tables. I think a lot of people want to do that, but not everyone necessarily has that level of passion and excitement to teach that comes from that specific wellspring. Like, notably, you were in the middle of some real career success as you're
Mhm.
applying and as you're beginning to coach, and that it was still something you wanted to do when you weren't like, hey, I'm out of work for the past 3 years, something like that. So I guess, where does that excitement come from for you? Is that something that you felt like you've always felt like you wanted to pass that on, like liked working with young people? I guess I'm interested in what sort of spawned that wellspring for you of wanting to pass it on to the next generation.
I have never thought about like where that spark came from, but now that you're saying it, I think one, it comes from, earlier I mentioned my love to learn through
Mm-hmm.
observation. I also like how I feel when especially when I was in school and I got the
Mm-hmm.
thing from my
Light
teacher,
bulb turns
whatever
on.
was being imparted, and I was able to kind of like get it. The feeling that I got versus and the feeling that my classmates got
Mm-hmm.
and my instructor. And when I got to Juilliard in particular, uh, I made it a point to sit next to my acting teacher
Mm-hmm.
in my first year. And there was something about the scaffolding of our first year that I was really intrigued by because we improv like the first quarter
Mm-hmm.
silently. It was like improv through like imagination and like movement a lot. We rarely spoke. We rarely did dialogue, and we didn't even get full scenes
Mm-hmm.
until our last
Yeah,
year.
perfect. I've been
That
cast as spear
scaffolding,
carriers for the last 6 years. I'm ready for this. I've been doing no dialogue anyway at Louisville. Come on.
right? And I think seeing there's a type I remember sitting next to Richard Feldman, who's my acting teacher at Juilliard, and one day after class, I was like, "This is a lab.
Mm-hmm.
like we're discovering and trying to figure things out, and something that might work for one person may not work for another person, and how somebody gets from A to B is going to be different from another person, even if they're doing the same scene. There's just like all this like nuance and different skill sets, and as you know, actors, our own given circumstances that we're bringing in. And I think I was just always kind of curious about how someone can be led or prompted or prodded or encouraged to get to a certain
Hmm.
place, and how things get interpreted in people's minds, and then when someone gets it, it's really
Hmm.
exciting to me. It's just it I don't know why I've gotten chills watching my students.
Yep.
I've cried a couple of times. It just I don't know what that thing is, but I know that the joy of seeing things click in students and other actors is really
Yep.
exciting to me. It's something I love
It's so
it.
interesting you say that as someone who was formerly religious but is not now. I mean, I was raised without real religion. I mean, I'm Jewish but not really practicing. And the to me, it's always felt like a religious experience. It's been the closest. It made me understand, like, oh, right, that kind of connection, the human connection that happened in the theater for me was like, oh, this is what other people must be getting in church that I'm not getting, or that I didn't have that experience of connecting to humanity, sort of until being in a rehearsal room and being like, oh, right, we're doing the thing.
I mean, I tell my boyfriend all the time, I'm like, well, theater is my
Hmm.
church. Like, even like backstage at Cabaret, at the end of the first number, when they sing Willkommen, starting in that last chorus, it's slowed down, but like the music is like banging,
Hmm.
and it's slow, and the dancers are like, oh, it just I get chills every time, and the audience is going crazy. I'm like, yeah, this is my church. This is where I see humanity coming together, being in agreement under the believability of what is going
Hmm.
on stage. We're all saying
Hmm.
yes. We're all excited about it, and we're all about to let these lights go down, be quiet, watch what's happening, and allow ourselves to be
It's so
affected by
true.
it. It's church.
Is there anything, in terms of a spiritual practice or just any kind of practice that you do to kind of connect to your own fire and passion as an artist? Like, especially, I guess I wonder in the moments of commercial success or excitement, or here I'm going to go to the Tony Awards, I'm doing whatever, that kind of experience. Do you have anything for yourself, whether it's a physical practice, whether it's a spiritual practice, or anything that helps you, I guess, reconnect to, okay, what is that reason that I wanted to go into this industry in the first place? And what is that part of me that the artistry you described in terms of stuff you'd say no to and yes to? Is there any kind of practice for you in terms of what that is?
I don't have a I don't have a practice around like a spiritual or a I wish I meditated more.
Sure. We can all pretend like we meditate, right? We all meditate. I've been on Headspace or whatever before, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't have like are you asking in terms of like what like how do I keep myself
Yeah.
maybe grounded or like it,
I do think, I guess I think my experience at least is that a lot of people at 17, 18 feel locked into that I want to change the world. This is the kind of
uh,
artist I want to be, and that by 19 to 45, is when we hit that range. It can become a little bit more like I want my retirement and I want a certain kind of
mhm.
career success, and I guess I wonder if there's any kind of consciousness, and it doesn't have to be, hey, I do yoga, or here's what the specific practice is or whatever. But I guess I'm kind of wondering, like, you strike me as somebody who is still very connected to your artistry, and that is a goal that I think a lot of young people would have that they can carry into their late 30s, early 50s, wherever we are now. And I think, uh, yeah, I'm wondering how you do that, how you achieve sort of staying as connected as you are to sort of the artist of it all, and not just the commercial success.
I believe that in how I've kind of begun to look at this career, there's a practicality to it, as opposed to where I would say in the beginning it felt very much like altruism
Mm-hmm.
in art, like doing it to change the world, to, all of this. That is a given,
Mm-hmm.
I think. Change the world, I think, is huge, but like change a person, right? Expand someone's capacity to empathize. To me, if I'm doing a show, if I'm acting in front of any number of people, I believe that it is a given. People will come, and by seeing it, by nature, they will be changed.
Mm-hmm.
Simply, even if their ideas about something doesn't change, because they came,
Mm-hmm.
they are different than when they first arrived. So I now kind of live under the understanding that I can do this industry as a career and know that the artistry will come.
Hmm.
The art will never leave.
Mm-hmm.
I will always, I might have to do something that I don't necessarily want to do, that I maybe don't care about, but I know, and I can't be sure, but I know that the things that I want to do, the things that change me, they're going to come,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
because they have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Repeatedly,
Yeah.
repeatedly. I am so proud of the work that I've done thus far. I have liked and loved
Mm-hmm.
everything that I've done. I can't say that I've done a project and been like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Wish I hadn't done that. Um, you know, that's all we kind of have.
Mm-hmm.
When you sit back and you are 30 plus and you're looking at the gallery of your work as an artist, I want to be able to go back through that hall and say, I am proud of every single thing that I've done. That may not be so much true like after cabaret is done, because my mind is different,
Mm-hmm.
my needs are different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think just knowing that I'm always going to have the choice to be an artist, it's intrinsic. It's never going to leave.
Yep.
But there are people who are
For
actors
sure.
who are
I think
like,
most
oh,
people
I'm
would
gonna
not
do.
look at their gallery and say everything I'm so proud of. They might say that one I did for the money. Really loved that one. That was health insurance. I need some health insurance that month. I mean, like, I'm not sure
Yeah,
every actor would leave their career and say. I mean, it's not that they're not proud of it, like they're ashamed of it, but that not that every
right.
project had that kind of. I mean, that's a real goal to aspire to feel that way.
Yeah, and I do, and I tell my agent and manager this a lot. I do envy the people um who just want to work.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
It's like, wow. And they've got the money to show for it. They've got the, whatever. For those like myself who, in the beginning really was very decisive and particular about the things that I did, it's paying off.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I mean, it's paid off, but I have missed out on lots of
Yeah.
money and lots of stability because I didn't want to be on the
Yeah.
CW, or I didn't want to, for these various things. But I just to beat a dead horse, I believe that the art will always be
Yeah.
available to me.
Well, and I think there are definitely people who go, I just want to work, or I'm just interested in the money or the career success. I do think there's also people who will kind of approach it like, hey, let me do the CW show or do the NBC show so that I can do the thing I'm really interested. Like they might think like, okay, if I can get to that level in the TV world, then I can break into this world in the theater world because it's especially you're looking at non-musical Broadway plays. It's like how many roles are available. I mean, you've done a non-musical Broadway play, but I think if you're not a celebrity, I think a lot of people are like, how do I work at that higher level that'll pay the bills and be the kind of artistry I want to do if you don't already have that name or if you don't already have, so some people are sort of like, but then how many years do you spend trying to build that up before you then get to do the thing that you're artistically excited about?
Yeah. And then like, you know, people, it's funny, like people, they're like, oh, you're on Broadway. Oh, you're on Broadway again. There's this idea that like you've hit the pinnacle of what you got into this industry to
Mm-hmm.
do, when in fact it's actually, I see it much more on like a horizontal plane, and that Broadway is this thing. The only reason I'd say that if anybody's going to place it on a vertical line and put it up at the top, is because it pays a lot.
Monetarily, it's above other things. Yeah.
Monetarily, it's above. But I'm dying to work with Club
Yep.
Thumb. I've never worked with them. Everything I've seen there, I've been obsessed
Yep.
with, and I really want to do a summer
Yep.
works
Yep.
production. And they don't go on for like 2
Mm-hmm.
months, you know? But that's like one of my
Mm-hmm.
goals. It's not Broadway. I can't. I'm not even certain if it was like a
Mm-hmm.
goal. I think it was something that I thought might happen if I was
Sure.
in this long enough. It happened much earlier than I had
Yep.
expected, but um, I think as I experience different theater, different television, short films, features, I'm also my taste is
Mm-hmm.
developing, and I'm saying like, yeah, okay, that doesn't Club Dump, doesn't pay Broadway scale, but they're doing work that I'm really interested
Mm-hmm.
in, really intimate, like smart, beautifully written theater. I want a part of
Mm-hmm.
that as much as I, yeah, would love another
For
Broadway
sure.
show.
For sure. Let's move toward the end here as we talk about give a little advice. Before I ask for sort of general advice, I sort of I've written down. You mentioned being a competitive gymnast. Do you feel like there's
Mm.
anything that you took from that experience of sort of your athletic background that carried forward into your career as an actor?
Yeah, I when I was in grad school, I was always like, this is so silly that we're like, this isn't like a thorough warm up to
Mm-hmm.
me. Or like I would be like, this is not like,
You touch your toes. That I do a lot more than that.
yeah, like great.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so used to like deep
Mm-hmm.
stretching for like 30
Mm-hmm.
minutes, like a real warm up and stretch that lasted 30
Mm-hmm.
minutes. And I still do
Mm-hmm.
that like before shows. I mean, it's not quite 30 minutes, but my part in cabaret isn't that physically demanding. But I still make out, and I do it because the relief of
Mm-hmm.
tension. How much tension can I just like get out of my body before I like come on and, try to be as present as
Mm-hmm.
possible. I would say that, and I would say, my understanding, it goes back to
Mm-hmm.
rigor as well, particularly like gymnastics. I've played many sports, but there's a rigor to it and an understanding of a need. Like you can also be with any sport, you can be naturally
Yep.
talented, but then you learn the tools that do make
Yep.
you better, as opposed to
Just
a
a smarter
smarter
gymnast. You got to be a
gymnast.
better gymnast. But
Right.
you learn what is trainable. I mean, I think uh, in everything there's natural ability, but that the ability to work hard will then unlock that natural ability often much more than just. It's very rare that anyone and anything can just skate by on natural ability. You're going to have to at some point go, how do I get the most out of my God given talents?
And that's what I think I also took from gymnastics into theater. It took me a minute to learn that some things can actually be
Mm-hmm.
taught. I wasn't, and that's some things that I was afraid I couldn't do was actually
Uh
skill
huh. Just
based.
had to learn.
If you tell me that something is a skill that I'm not nailing at the moment, I will go home and
Yep.
I will
Yep.
work it. I will work it to death. Like for cabaret, like I said, I'm not a singer, I'm not a trained singer, and I have to pick this note out of
Mm-hmm.
air because there's nothing. And I auditioned for it, did it perfectly, started rehearsing, and I just like could
Mm-hmm.
not do it. Music supervisor Meg, obsessed with her. She was like, "Oh, I said, is this a
Mm-hmm.
skill? Like be able to like have the note in your head and then sing it?" And she was like, "Yeah." She's like, "That's not
Mm-hmm.
talent." She was like, "You have all the makings of a singer already. The things that we would need to work on are
Mm-hmm.
skill-based things." She was like, "So I'm going to give you some warm-ups or some exercises and things." Now I now
Yep.
I've got it. But it was because I was told it was a
Yep.
skill. In gymnastics, it's all skill. It's you come in with your
Yep.
talent, but you learn
Yep.
skills. And they're literally called
Yep.
skills.
But there's a facade
You
with
know?
acting sometimes, acting and singing, where we go, this is mystical talent. This is something some people can do it and some people can't. It's like, that's not true. You may have varying level of ability. There are people who really are tone deaf, who that's going to be a real challenge.
Yeah,
But for most people, it's trainable. Most people, you can train your ear, you can train your body to do more than it could do before, where it may not be able to get to the same level that someone else can, but they are skills.
right.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised, like, and I think that learning when she said that, that was where I was like, oh, maybe I will get a
Mm-hmm.
vocal coach, a singing coach, so that I'm enjoying my time in
Mm-hmm.
cabaret from day one, and I'm in awe of those triple threats that are in
Mm-hmm.
this cast. And I kind of I don't think I'm going to jump into dancing, but the the singing part, I'm like, now that I know that I at least have what a singer would need to
Yeah.
have naturally to begin, I can start building
Yeah.
skills. So I'm like, why
So you
not?
heard it here, folks. Book your first Broadway show, book your second Broadway show, and then you can start working on singing. And it's really possible for all of you too. No, let's end with a little advice to our young artists there. So I'll let you kind of choose your
Sure.
own adventure. You can either give advice just in general to a young person who wants to follow in your footsteps, or if you want to give any kind of college edition experience advice from what you've gotten to see behind the table with MTCA in terms of biggest mistakes or biggest successes that you think young people could use. You can choose your own adventure. So either to the college edition or just to the life experience of a young artist. I leave it in your hands.
I think this goes kind of with both. I think a lot of times we hear people, I think, yeah, I've heard some students still say this. If there's something else you could see yourself doing, go do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we are no longer, I don't think we've ever been in that space as artists. I think if you have desires to do other things as well as perform and act, you can do those things. I never intend to not be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I want to explore coaching on television sets and film sets as an acting coach. I want to continue to work with MTCA. I want to teach at the college level. That's just a desire that I have. That in no way is going to keep me from being an actor
Mm-hmm.
in the way that we're also seeing people who both do costume design and set design,
Mm-hmm.
which cabaret is an example of that. I have actor friends um, who love waiting tables.
Mm-hmm.
They'll do that. I have actor friends who work retail. They love doing that, who have their own businesses as graphic designers. I think the idea should be more to create like a full life and not to hinder yourself in that because you have other interests and passions that you can't also be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
There are a million ways to be an actor. Just be, I'd say for yourself, be as defined about that as you'd like to be. But you don't have to just do that if you can see yourself doing other things. You can be multifaceted. Those are, I think, some of the more interesting actors out there anyway.
I love it. Well, we know we can see you each night at the Kit Kat Club on Broadway or on Instagram at Calvin Leon Smith, where you post about as often as I do. It's very exciting, the Instagram experience of Calvin Leon Smith. But by the time this releases, it's going to be doubled. We're going to have doubled your followers just from this podcast. Calvin, thanks for the time today, man. This was so fun.
Thanks, Charlie.